All right, everybody. Juan Morales here, and you're in for a special treat today because today we're going to cover one of my favorite distinctions, one of the best and most complete models I've found to really optimize pretty much any problem, and that has allowed me to understand why certain things happen and why certain things don't happen the way I expect them to. And it's a concept that I like to call the iceberg of wins. Now, you've probably seen an iceberg, not in real life. I haven't seen one in real life, but you've probably seen an iceberg, at least the picture of it, and you know that there's a part of it that's above sea level, and then there's a part of it that is below sea level. Now, what's the purpose of this, and why do I see it as an extremely valuable model? And it's because when we apply the concept of winning to the iceberg, what happens is we have these above sea level wins, and then we have these below sea level wins. Now let's talk a little bit about what makes them different. So above sea level wins are the visible wins. These are the objectives that we usually go for. This is the goal, the premium objective that we're going for, the one thing that we want to have happen. This is when we get that ultimate result. This is when we lost the weight. This is when we got the money. This is all the stuff that's visible. Those are the above sea level wins. Now, what are the below sea level wins? Well, the wins that are below sea level are those wins that happen whether you get the objective or not. And by that I mean overcoming your fears, finding new traits that you didn't know you had, challenging yourself to new responsibilities and new tasks, and much, much more. Why do I bring this up? Okay, I've had this happen many times, especially in the past couple of weeks. I've had calls with different clients and different partners and all this kind of things. And what I realize is that they, for the most part, whenever they feel annoyed or they feel that something's not worth it or they feel that something is not worth attempting even because they don't see it or they don't believe in it, is because the only wins that they're looking at there are the above sea level wins, the visible wins. They don't take into consideration all the other wins that you get, whether it's practicing, whether it's trying something new that they hadn't tried before, whether it's overcoming resistance, overcoming their own fears. You're not looking at those wins because we don't tend to conceive those as wins. We think that as long as we get the ultimate objective, that's a binary situation. Either we get it or we don't. And every win per se is a binary situation because at the end of it, you're going to be able to know whether you got it or you didn't. But whenever you go on an endeavor, whenever you set out to do something, to create something, to test something out, whatever the thing is, there's always more than just the above sea level wins. There's all these things underneath, whether it's discipline, whether it's overcoming resistance, overcoming fear, overcoming procrastination, putting yourself out there, all these things that are wins. That for the longest time, if we focus only on the visible wins, guess what? We're not even getting those wins. And those are the wins that shape your character. Those are the wins that make you a successful leader. Those are the wins that really show you how much of a warrior you are. The below sea level wins. It's the wins that nobody's going to see, at least not right away. But those are the ones that change your character, and they change them in a long-term way. Because once you start doing these things and once you start really focusing on your discipline, your practicing, all these things that sound boring because let's face it, they're not as sexy as getting the $1 million or the $100,000 or whatever your income goal is or whatever your weight loss goal is or whatever any of those things look like. The fact that you're looking at the whole iceberg and not just the part that's at the top, that's what's going to make it worth your while. Now, for the longest time, I struggled with this one myself. And I would get annoyed. And I would actually get paralyzed. Because I would not know whether any endeavor was really worth pursuing. Because I didn't really think I could get whatever the goal was. So if I didn't think I could get the goal, why even try? And then one day I had this revelation. I realized that all these things we're thinking about, there's the above sea level win, and then there's the below sea level wins. The above sea level wins is the one that we're always aiming for, and it's the ones that are visible. But the below sea level wins, those are the ones that shape you to become the best version of yourself. And that is why you want to look at all of it. You want to look at the entire iceberg before making a decision on whether a task is worth it or not. Because if you only focus on the above sea level winds, you're only going to look for all these things that may sound fantastic, but at the same time, you're only going to measure yourself by whether you get that one objective or you didn't. Instead, think of all the other things that you get along the way. And this reminds me of a story from my favorite teacher in high school. He was the 12th grade calculus teacher. Brilliant, brilliant man. Very advanced for a 12th grade calculus class, I'll tell you that. And most people in the class would just put their heads down and go to sleep for a while. But one of the things I learned from him, obviously I didn't learn it at the time, but looking back now I can see that example, was that whereas most people, when they grade your exams or they grade your tests, they just go to the answer and they see whether you got the answer right or wrong. So it's a binary situation again. Whether you got it right or wrong means yes or no, means 1 or 0, point or no point. This professor went about it in a different way. What he did, because it was calculus, is that he would check the work. And he would go through the work and maybe find a sign or a parenthesis that was misplaced or something. And then he would correct that, but then he would keep going based on the assumption that you took at that moment. If you changed a sign and that would have changed everything else, he kept simulating it all the way down to see what you got. And at the end, he only deducted a small percentage of the points to that problem because you didn't get the answer right. As long as the work was there, the logic was there, the understanding was there, and was visible to him as a calculus professor, that he was looking at it and he could see that you were on the right track, you just made a small detail-based mistake. But then, and I remember this clearly, that I had this problem where I did not get the right answer, but I got almost the full mark. And it was the first time in my life I had ever seen that happen, where I was wrong in the answer, but I got 95% of the points. Why did that happen? Because he thought in that same way. He understood that you have the above sea level wind and then the below sea level winds. And all these small things that we do every day, all these tasks that we put in every day, that we do every day, they add up. It's just that sometimes we don't see it right away and we don't see that above sea level wind. And then we can't make that goal. And because we have binary thinking happening, we believe that then we become a failure, or we are a failure, or we have failed, or whatever that flavor of that is. But if you go back and you realize, you're going to see how many things you did really, really well. Okay? So, here's my suggestion to you. When you look back at things that you've done that you think you failed at, look for those below sea level winds. Look for those things that did happen along the way. Maybe it was a job from where you got fired from, but you learned all these things. Maybe it was a business that you got started and the idea ultimately didn't pan out, but it taught you how to deal with people, how to deal with partners, how to write up contracts, all these other things that are there for the taking. And one thing I realize is when you start looking at life through that lens, it changes your dynamic, because what you realize is all the time you're winning. It's just that some of the wins are not visible right away. But if you adjust that lens and you keep taking delivery of those wins, those below sea level wins, you're going to change your life forever. So remember, when you're looking at the iceberg of wins, remember that there's the above sea level winds, the visible ones, and then there's the below sea level winds, which are the ones that have to do with your character, have to do with the stuff that you learn, have to do with all these intermediate goals that you achieved that may not have led to the ultimate goal that you wanted, but it showed you the way to get those intermediate goals. It is an extremely powerful concept if you apply it correctly, and I suggest that every day you get used to looking for the below sea level winds. The more you see them, the more you're able to see them, and the faster you'll see them every time. Which means you'll start exploring more, you'll start discovering more, and you'll start gaining more, because all of these adventures, you don't measure them binary. You're behaving like my teacher did in 12th grade calculus. You're not judging it just by whether the answer was right or wrong. You're judging it based on the journey of the whole thing. And that's a much broader perspective to judge from, and to take feedback from, and to take inspiration from. And that's going to allow you to move forward a lot faster in your life with a lot more certainty and a lot more determination. So remember, the iceberg of winds: above sea level winds, below sea level winds. Never forget the below sea level winds. Those are very, very important. I wouldn't say as important as the other ones, but super important. Because long term, they stack up. Long term, if you keep doing them, you're developing more discipline. You're developing more of all these other traits that you need to develop in order to get to that above sea level wind. So never discount something just because it doesn't have that above sea level wind that you're thinking it's going to have. Always look for those below sea level winds. Look for where you can exercise that discipline, where you can exercise your willpower, where you can overcome some fears, where you can try new things, where you can figure out new hidden talents that you have. But you can't do that unless you start judging a task, a venture, an endeavor by seeing all of the iceberg of winds. The above sea level winds and the below sea level winds. So anyway, that's it for me today. Juan Morales signing out. I'll see you on the next one.